could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, where did you grow up? What was life like where you grew up? And at that time, and then how did you end up in Strathcona County?
Well, I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan, and went to university at the University of Regina. Took an honors year after my BA, and I was studying history, which was my passion. I love to do research. And I did most of my work that fourth year in the Provincial Archives, which happened to be located on the 5th floor of the University Library building. And so I got to know the library very, very well and liked doing research. A position came up. It was a part-time maternity leave replacement at the time, turned into full-time, and it came open in the reference department. And at that time, most librarians were English literature specialists, and I had this other knowledge in history. So I was kind of hired as a subject specialist reference library assistant. I was taught reference by one of the reference librarians, and in those days it was thousands of reference books that we literally had to know backwards and forwards. And I ended up working there for about 5 years. So that's where I got a lot of my knowledge of libraries. I loved working there. But I realized that to go any further with my career, I'd have to bite the bullet and get a degree in library science, which at the time the closest one was in Edmonton. I was married, and my husband got a transfer up to Edmonton, and I started at the U of A and was in the first MLS class that graduated in 1978. And that's how I ended up in libraries. Loved doing research, and never took a public library course, of course. Did take a lot of stuff in special libraries, a lot of reference, and really did not have any great desire to ever work in an academic library. Again, I'd sort of had my fill of that. So when a position came up, I think it was 1977 when the library in Sherwood Park opened in Strathcona County, and it was because I was in library school at the time, it was, really touted as this one, and it was just an absolutely beautiful facility, and new, and it was a big grand opening, and so we paid special attention to it. So when a position came up there, I thought, what the heck, I'll apply, and the rest is history. Never had any desire to change. I don't think there was ever 2 days that I did the same job, the same as I'd done the day before. It was always a challenge and always changing. And that's how I ended up here.
So you first met, I guess it was Heather Bell that interviewed you?
Heather Bell hired me, yeah. I worked with Heather Bell for many years. And she was a fabulous person to have as the first head of the library out here. Remember, there's no public library out here before. She started one, and she had been director of the school libraries, I believe. And so, but well known in the community, a pioneer, a family in the community, well known in the community. She was head of the Chamber of Commerce. She was involved with all the schools. She knew all the principals. And so she was a very good advocate and an administrator, especially for the very first library. And she was a character. She was fun to work with.
So did you start off then as a librarian with the library and then move to sort of head up the Adult Services Division?
I started as the librarian. Now remember, the Adult Services Division was 4 people, myself, one other full-time library assistant, and 2 other part-time library assistants. There was 3 librarians that worked at Strathcona County and Strathcona Municipal Library at the time: Heather Bell, myself, and Kathy Pine, who was the children's librarian. Heather Bell knew very quickly when she was setting up the library, and she had been working, of course, for 2 or 3 years before the library opened to get everything, the collection built up. And she knew very quickly, and you'd have to know Heather Bell, that she really didn't care. She loved children, but she didn't want to do the children's part. Hired a children's librarian. But then it got... There was another fellow, actually, who was hired as the first head of Adult Services, but he just didn't work out. And he left, and I came on, and from there, we just kept growing.